When I hear the story about you coming to the door and you knock between 45 seconds and a minute, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts in hindsight or if there's something else that could be done to avoid this kind of stuff.
Probably the last 2 years. So I ran our major case unit before I had just transitioned to the parcel interdiction unit because I was thinking, man, I've probably got 4 years left before I'm going to retire. I wanted to kind of slow things down. I already made entry in over 2,000 search warrants and doors. And I thought to myself, the luck's going to run out. It's a numbers thing. It's an odds. Eventually I'm going to be in a critical incident. I don't want to be. So let's go ahead and start tapering this career off, slowing down, because I've been going 100 miles an hour for probably 15 of my 20 years with search warrants and drugs and all that. And so I wanted to transition. And the last 2 years, I had constantly thought about two things that bothered me. Number one, eventually something's going to happen. But the main thing was, as I matured as a person and as a dad and all that, once we would go through these doors, you would have 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old kids just terrified. All of a sudden you've got 8, 10 cops coming in with guns, screaming, putting people on the ground. And that started affecting me. That started making me go, man, this just ain't worth it. We're traumatizing these kids. I can understand why they grow up hating the police. You start thinking of all these things, and I'm going, we've got to do something different. So we started pulling people off. We'd wait till they leave their house. They were at a gas station, barbershop, wherever. And we'd start grabbing them up because it lowered our risk and it lowered their risk and it lowered the trauma on these kids. So that was pretty big to me. So we had done that probably in 80% of the cases the last 2 years I was up there. This wasn't my call. We were helping out. So we did what they asked us to do. If I could do it different, if none of the dynamics changed, because people go, well, why did you have to go there at 12:30 at night if she wasn't a threat, if she wasn't the main target? She was one of the targets, but she wasn't the main target. And I try to explain to people because word gets out so quick when you do a warrant. I mean, it's even before the internet. We used to call it, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I'm going to say it. We used to call it the ghetto net because it was like, and it doesn't matter if it's black or white. It was just, if you hit a door, everybody knew, man. Yeah. I mean, they just knew. Calls went out. And so when you do these type things where evidence might be at different locations, you do them simultaneous so nothing gets destroyed because that's what you take into court. Glover's car was registered to Brianna's house, his bank account. When he bonded out of jail, it was there. His cell phone was registered there. Everything was in her name or at her house. That was Glover's. So they wanted that evidence to tie him in to that house because they had pictures of him coming there, getting packages, leaving. Brianna taking him down to the trap house, dropping stuff off. So that was
Brianna, there was evidence that she was involved in this stuff.
Yeah, after the fact, they pulled Glover's phone calls, and he's talking to his baby mama, and he said, I need somebody to go to Brianna's house and see if the cops missed that money. And she was like, oh, you were letting her hold your money? Why was she holding your money? She was mad. And he was like, well, she holds a lot of people's money. It's just what she does. So it was she slinging the dope? I don't think so. I don't think physically she was selling dope. But she was part of the organization in a peripheral way, bonding them out of jail, letting them use her address for stuff, holding money. So she was tied into it. And people always go, I hate this phrase. Oh, you think you're judge, jury, and executioner. And I'm going, no, I was just trying to save my life. This wasn't a payment for the crime. This wasn't, that's not the intent here. So that aggravates me when people say that.
I worry that people don't understand there may not be solutions to these things. So, you look, you've got someone who's selling illegal drugs, very dangerous ones. I mean, what was suspected of fentanyl?
We believe fentanyl. We know meth, but yeah, fentanyl. He had the pills.
So, you can come out and make an argument about the legalization of drugs, but when you start getting into areas about fentanyl, you start getting harder questions. There are some libertarians who are outright like, no, people can take whatever they want. And I'm like, I get that. But the question is, even then, there's still got to be some restrictions on how much or to children. I mean, you got to prevent these things. So ultimately what ends up happening is we've got a big society. You've got people on the left, people on the right, libertarians, authoritarians, and everyone's got a different view, which means ultimately there's a compromise. The compromise we have right now, whether people like it or not, is that if somebody is illegally selling very serious drugs, we're going to stop them. I think most people The overwhelming majority of people are going to be like, yeah, I don't want someone selling fentanyl in my area because you don't know who he's selling to, and it's an extremely dangerous drug. Yeah. You go to local people and say someone's selling, marijuana or something like that, and they're going to roll their eyes and be like, is this a priority right now? So the fentanyl matters. And if that's the case, and there are parents who want their neighborhoods cleaned up and they don't want these drugs around, well, then someone's got to stop it. But that means you're going to have police going and serving warrants. And what people need to understand, like you said, simultaneously all at the same time and relatively late for strategic reasons, and also probably for safety reasons, for you've got less people who are out and about, right. Things like that. Then you have to contend with the fact that people are allowed to defend themselves in their homes. No one's going to take that away. At least some people are trying to. And this means that you get a perfect storm. A warrant is being served. Nobody answers. The door gets kicked in, and then the guy shoots. Whether it was an accident or whether it was he didn't know you were cops or did, regardless, the conflict starts. Someone loses their life. Some people, these activists especially, think there's something that can be done or has to be done, and maybe. I'm not saying we don't investigate and try and figure out ways to solve these problems, but man, some people got to realize that there may always be this cause and effect that exists within this system, at least as we've defined it right now. If people have a right to keep and bear arms in their homes to defend themselves, and we expect police to shut down people selling drugs, very serious ones, you will get a situation like this, and people will die, and there can be. I think one of the officers, he fired rounds that went to other apartments or something like that. Yeah,
so the walls were co-joined, the kitchen walls, and that was one of the mistakes in this thing. Not him shooting, because he thought we were getting executed at that doorway. You had metal and concrete and the rapid shots, and he thought, oh man, he knew I'd gone down. He thought, dude, they're getting killed at the door. I got to do something.
Yeah.
But the problem is we weren't provided a map of the layout of how that other apartment was butted up.
Yeah.
And from the outside looking at it, it doesn't look like it. It looks like they're separate, things.
Right.
So if you hadn't been in it or hadn't looked at the actual layout, so there were some mistakes made. Don't get me wrong.
No, for sure. What I mean to say is, just in a bigger picture, I'm reminded of this story out of Europe where I think it was in Denmark. There was a mass shooter, and maybe it wasn't Denmark. It was a country up in Europe. And after the shooting happened, they mourned and then did nothing. And they said, well, sometimes people are crazy and they get guns. What are we supposed to do, right? This was an aberration. It wasn't a fault of the system. It was a fault of sometimes people do bad things. And that's the challenge I see with this. I certainly think there's ways to reform, and there needs to be, at least in our criminal justice system, very serious reforms. But my point is, if people are unwilling to confront the system in any meaningful way, and I mean like the rioters are not confronting in any meaningful way, the system doesn't change. In fact, the rioters are probably only making it worse, because now you're going to get more regular people saying more weapons for the cops, just shut it all down. They're going to say get tougher, get more aggressive. Then you're going to get activists who are like, my friend was beaten by the cops. Well, it's because the community is demanding, these things get shut down. You get people calling the mayor's office. The mayor calls gets the cops on the radio and says, I don't care what you do, just shut down the protests, shut down the riots. The cops say, okay, get it done. The people complain, and it's an endless cycle. Yep. The issue I take with a lot of this is these people who live in these cities, they're the ones who are voting in these Democratic politicians who don't care about them,
right?
Demanding of them police action on crime. Then when the action on crime results in some kind of accident or a brutal event, it's these same people who are now complaining about that event, out marching in the streets. Is one of the reasons I don't want to live in these cities anymore. Because it seems like these people don't have a logical process in their mind as to why these things are happening. They just say, I don't understand why there's got to be crime, and I also don't understand why, cops are so mean, and I don't understand why people are getting beaten. And it's like, because people are shooting each other, and because you want the shooting to stop, so the cops go out and the cops are scared of getting shot, and then some cops get shot, and then cops shoot back, and then you complain that the cops shot back. I'm like, I don't know what you want,
this is like, man. The majority of our loudest mouth protesters, and I'm not talking about somebody really wanting change, walking with the sign, doing it the right way. I'm talking about the guys that were jumping on cars, taunting police, constantly in people's face. I mean, if there was a cheerleading competition of little girls in downtown Louisville during this. It was a little bit further in, so I think they thought it was safe enough, but it wasn't. And these guys were getting in these parents and these kids' face and saying will rape your kids. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff. And then they want to say the police are the problem. And all these guys who are out here for reform and stuff that were doing this all have had huge criminal records. There's like 3 of them that have been killed since the riot started that were the major drivers behind this stuff. 2 of them shot in the head, and no, all 3 of them were shot in the head. One was in a carjacking, so that may have been accidental, but the other 2 were targeted hits. And the funny thing is, the rumor in the city was all the people who disagree with the police were going, oh, the police are out here killing all the protesters. And we're going, you kidding me? Because they caught somebody on all of them, you know.
Well, there was in Ferguson.
The lifestyle. I mean,
in Ferguson, I believe it was they found a vehicle with someone killed in the front seat. I think that's what it was. It's been a minute. I don't know if you've heard that story or whatever. It wasn't the cops who did it, although the activists are pushing that. There's a conspiracy theory out of Ferguson that the police are going around and executing the people who organized the protest.
That's what they're saying in Louisville.
That's crazy, man.
It's like a couple of weeks, probably a month ago now, there was a police chase. A guy had shot somebody, robbed him, shot him. They're chasing him. He wrecked out. He eats his gun. Boom, kills himself. So they've got their body cameras on and car cameras. But ever since our case, before Breonna Taylor, when our city investigated the thing, they would release body cam footage within 24 hours. But in our case, they said since there was no body cam, they were like, well, we can't talk about the case. And I said, well, what's the difference in releasing body cam that shows everything or disputing the lies? Well, they didn't have an answer for it, naturally. But because since then the state police took over investigating, because they were like, the protesters, that was one of their demands. We don't want LMPD investigating. Fine, well, let state police do it. So now the state police investigate. Their policy is we don't release body cam footage till we're ready, till we've investigated enough. Screw you, we're going to do whatever we want. And now they're saying, and they had 3 days of protests saying, oh, it's a cover-up. The police went up and shot him in the head. He didn't shoot himself.
Yep.
So it's just, it doesn't matter what you do. It's
right.
going to be, like we said earlier, there's that fringe on both sides that are just crazy, on the right and the left, that no matter what you do, it's not going to be right.
I always try to clarify in that it's true, but it seems to be the exception for the right and the rule for the left.
Yeah.
The conservative media apparatus tends to get stories correct. The liberal establishment media apparatus tends to get stories wrong. And it's probably because these are big corporate outlets that are driven by profit, whereas conservative outlets tend to be driven by passion, ideology, or ideology. I am not saying that one side is right or wrong, because a lot of people hear that. This is fascinating, and they're like, you're saying the right is good. And I'm like, conservative news outlets are, small budget passion projects where people are like, I believe in this, and I want to push this story out. So they tend to be trying to follow the facts. But with the conservative perspective, with conservative commentary and opinion, the establishment's just like, put whatever gets us the clicks, man.
Yeah.
Well, truth be told, there's a lot of ideology behind it as well, with trying to get Democrats elected. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.